Hi there, Heather Steves here, and today I want to share with you a nice little card that I made using the Stitch Florals stamp and thin cut. So I'm starting out by cutting out this large floral bouquet with the thin cut, and I actually had a little bit of trial and error here. So as you can see, I placed my stamp down and I tried to line up the stamp in the die cut kind of as a dry fit, because what happens is the stem on the bouquet kind of shifts around a little bit, but then you see when I'm cutting this out, once I have it cut out, I'm still not really happy with it. The stem's still, the line isn't really in the middle, so I'm going to do it the other way. So typically I always stamp first and then I use my thin cut. But in this case, I think it's going to work out much better to actually use a thin cut first, and then I can place my stamp on top of the cutout paper, line it up, get it on my block, and then I get a much clearer image that I'm happier with. It's nicely centered now. So now I'm going to start to color in the flowers and the leaves. So I'm going to start with the leaves, and I'm using some Touch Twin Markers. They're no longer carried by Close to My Heart, but those are the ones that I still have. And I'm using two colors, leaf green and sap green. So I realized after I started coloring in that my camera wasn't really close enough for you to see the good detail of what I'm doing here. So if you want to skip ahead to the 3-minute and 50-second mark, that's where I picked it up and I zoomed in so you can see a little bit better. But I'll continue on anyway so you can see what I'm doing. So one thing that I learned with working with these markers and getting the shading to work as best as possible is to work in a small area. So you'll see that I'm just doing one leaf at a time. I'm putting down my lighter color and covering the entire leaf with that color, and then I'm going in with the darker one, and I am putting that where you would see a shadow. I'm putting it on the edge of the leaf as well, just because a leaf isn't flat. So the way that I looked at this was the leaf would be kind of bent over at its side, so it would be a little bit darker. So once I got that first layer of the darker shade, then I'm going back with the lighter shade and I'm coloring in over top of that, and that is what is helping it to blend together. So you'll notice as I put down the lighter shade on top of the darker that it starts to almost disappear, and it really blends in very nicely together. These two colors do complement each other very well. One thing that you need to remember when coloring with alcohol-based markers, or at least these ones, is that if you let them dry, then your color will sit on top and it won't blend. So that's a good thing and a bad thing. So as long as you're aware of that, you will notice that I do go back to the leaves that I did previously, and I take my darker shade again and I actually highlight where that shadow would be, where the leaf sits underneath the flower petals, because then that really shows the shadow that would occur. So now that I'm a little bit closer here, you can see a bit better detail. I'm using yellow marigold and golden yellow markers for this one. And as you can see, I'm taking the lighter color, I am coloring in the entire petal, and then I'm going back with the darker color and going around the edge, blending it back in with the lighter color. And then once that petal is kind of dry, then I'm going back with the darker color again, and then I'm putting down some more shadow where the overlapping would occur. So I'm just kind of playing around with it and blending things together, and then I do go back a couple of times once things are dry, and I go back and then I've put in some little dots. Again, I tried to use my blending marker, but since it was dried out, it didn't work. But you can use it to just put a little bit more of a highlight there, because it will push the color away and lighten it up a bit. So I'm just pulling out my color chart here, and I wanted to pick another color for that center piece. So I pulled out the pastel green, and although it's called a green, it really is very pale and more like a yellow to me. So I've added that in there, and then I'm just trying to figure out how to do a little bit of blending there. I used a bit of the orange, and I'm just kind of playing around and really just blending those two colors together almost completely so that it creates another color altogether. So now that most of my petals are dry, I've just gone back in with the darker orange, and I'm just putting some dots around just to add a little bit of texture to the leaves. So now I'm ready to assemble my card. So I've pulled out some white and some Sundance paper, and I have my Stitch Fancy bracket thin cuts, and I'm using those to cut out two nesting shapes so that I can use that for the front of my card. I also have a piece of avocado pattern paper. I believe it's out of one of the mix-ins, and I'm just inking the edges of that with the avocado ink, just to give it a little bit of softness and definition. So now for a little bit of fun, I grabbed my splatter box and my Sundance shimmer brush, and I'm going to splatter onto this little piece of white cardstock. So I'm just squeezing my shimmer brush. Now you have to be really careful because this could come out really fast and make a mess, so make sure you don't squeeze it over your paper. Once I get the ink out there, then I can start to splatter it. I'm just using my fingers, and I'm just covering up the area where the sentiment is going to go. So not the best method, but it was most effective and it worked. And so then I just have to clean myself up there, and then I have to set aside this little piece to dry because you want to be sure that you're not touching this when it's wet, because it will smudge and make a big mess. So just a quick little tip here: when you're folding on a score line, our card bases come pre-scored, and you just want to make sure that you are folding the valley to the outside. So it has a valley and a hill, and the hill goes on the inside. Even though it feels like it should go the other way, it doesn't. So just a little tip there. And now I'm just starting to assemble all of my pieces. So I am using foam tape on some of this just to give it some dimension, and attaching everything down to my card base. So now I'm going to add my sentiment. I'm using the intense black ink again, just because I want the black to match. As much as the color is the same on all of our black ink pads, the intensity is different, and so this is definitely a much darker image than just the regular black, so I wanted it to match. And now I'm putting the foam tape onto the card itself, only because I didn't really let the shimmer brush dry very long, and I don't want it to smudge by turning it over. So I just took a scrap piece of paper to give it some pressure and put it down. I'm also going to add foam tape to this flower bouquet as well, and that's going to really add a lot of dimension to this card. Before I attach my flower on there, I pulled out some thistle ribbon from my stash, and I'm just going to put a little bow just to add that nice little finishing touch on there, and then it's ready to get attached to the card base. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, and be sure to ring the bell to be notified when I post more videos.